you've got a tournament organizer that you did give a license to that has not met its obligations and continues to not and makes no plans to, don't let them use your game again. That's not even a fucked up enough word for them.
No, they think they're like, hey, look, there goes a T-Rex.
They vetted them and went, here you go, running it. Like they were going to give them $500,000, and it took significant community outrage, investigative journaling, and I think
no, it didn't.
Well,
no,
it took it took the drug. Take a breather, refresh, and join us here on the Rivalry Cooldown, where we talk about the current topics in esports from the experts. Now, in this week's episode, we are going to take another very topical approach and take a look at payment issues, contracts, and time for the industry to grow up when it comes to all of these legal things. Now, as you would expect, our 100% attendance rate, Nahaz, is back to join us. And when it comes to player rights and hounding Denial Esports, who else would we have other than SirScoots? Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Pleasure as always.
Great to be here.
So for those of you who don't know, if you don't follow SirScoots on Twitter, you're making a mistake. It's a great choice. But I believe today, as of recording, we are on, day 5 of Denial Watch? Day 5 of his watch. Every day, he tweets at Denial and a couple of other people and demands that they do the decent thing. So to give you a little background on exactly what that decent thing is, Denial is currently under a lot of fire, by Scoots and other people, about long-standing payment issues, both the old organization and the current one. So just cursory research on my part shows Call of Duty, Overwatch, Halo, H1Z1, CSGO, and Paladins, throughout the reign of Denial have all had payment issues. So tell us a little bit about your 5-day watch, Scoots. What prompted this?
Yeah, well, I guess a little backstory on Denial. There's been 2 versions of Denial, right? And the first version of Denial, some of the teams in the game genres you're mentioning is where some of those payment issues took place. And the main owner, basically, again, like for whatever reason, whether lack of money or mismanagement or shadiness, just ended up a lot of players not getting paid per their contracts. He ended up closing shop, basically walking away, and basically leaving a charred, dust. And then in come some new Denial guys, some white knights, so to speak, trying to do the right thing. Turns out it was basically a PR stunt, and they basically bought Robbie Ringola, I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right, bought him out of his part of the company because there's other investors in Denial, and go over the day-to-day operations of it. And their PR speak to all of us and to the world of esports was, hey, new Denial, new world, new guys running it. We're going to even though we don't have to, we're going to pay all the old debts and we're going to start all over and we're going to build this baby back up, right? And as we all know, it's really easy to own an esports team. Like anyone can do it. I could own one tomorrow, right? So these guys had actually, unfortunately for them, a little bit of negative history in their own past before they even got to Denial, whether it was Halo or money matches, one of the businesses one of the guys runs, etc. So even then, some people were like looking at them sideways going, really, you guys? And I don't know any of them. So I didn't really have any predisposed notion. I was like, wait, okay, maybe these guys do what they say. And they pay the Counter-Strike guys they owed, Anger and all those characters that played for them, and everybody else. That's great. That's how you got to start this thing, right? Well, now fast forward to the last couple weeks, and players have started coming out from a variety of games saying they owe us money, they're being disingenuous, they signed us under false pretenses, and it's basically just Groundhog Day all over again. And then once one set of players start speaking up, basically they all feel comfortable and they all start coming out of the woodwork. And it's blown up. There's now been articles written. There's more articles coming about various game genres that are being, and players that are being manipulated and not being paid, right? So I like calling out shady assholes on my Twitter feed. It's kind of what I like doing, right? People think that Richard and I get mad and angry when we're typing. this is like a fountain of youth to me. Like, I love this shit. I laugh when I'm doing it, and I'm having a good time,
100%.
and I'm fighting a good fight, right? Like, there's players that owe money, right? And I've seen contracts, I've seen emails, I've seen the evidence, right? So I believe it. Even people that haven't come forward, I've talked to, right? So my watch is basically what has happened. This drama blew up, basically around Call of Duty and their French squad. And out of that, my thought process was, look, if you guys are going to continue to do this, and now we're all finding out more about you, your players that you've signed are finding out that you might not be who you say you were. And whether you actually owe that kid money or not, how about you do the right thing now that kind of we know what this denial is, and release everybody. Release everyone from your shitty contracts. And then if a player or a squad wants to sign back up, now they kind of know what they're getting in for, right? A little buyer beware, right? So do the right thing. If you think you're so great and you think your players love you, release them, right? Let it hold. Like, if you love them, set them free, right? And so that's my thing. Like, and I keep hearing they're going to do that. I hear they're going to maybe even rebrand and throw, which is a smart idea. Like, why'd you bring back a shitty brand anyway, right?
That's sort of what I was going to ask.
Why even do that? It's not like denial is Cloud9, right? Like, what do you, like, just start over. Like, why'd you even buy that guy out? But I think obviously the other investors, there's obviously money involved in that brand, so maybe it did make sense. But like, so my watch is release them. And then if they come back to you and they get lawyers involved and want to sign back with you, then great. But in the meantime, let them fucking go, man. Because a lot of them, again, been recruited under nefarious, like, shady promises and disingenuous promises and shit. And so, like, do right. Like, let them go, right? And I guarantee if they let them go, no one, well, I can't say no one because I don't talk to all of them, but I guarantee a good chunk would not sign back up with them. Sure. So that's kind of my watch, right? And I will do it every morning when I wake up until this happens, or until, well, I don't care if they block me. I'll still do it. Doesn't matter to me. So yeah, that's kind of my watch. I definitely think this team needs to start over. Zach, I believe that's his real name. He goes by Zach, has kind of stepped away from day-to-day operations for a whole variety of reasons. He's one of the face of it. He's had some weird, politically incorrect tweets over the last couple of months. And so he's stepped away from day-to-day, but what I actually hear is he's actually really not stepped away. He's still involved. He's still talking and stuff behind the scenes now. So be it, right? So again, do the right thing, man. You guys want to do right by players, and then set them free. And then, let's get lawyers involved on the re-sign, because that's another big thing we're going to talk about is players getting lawyers and agents involved from pre-sign, not, oh God, I signed a bad contract. Can you look at what I already signed?
Please help.
Well, yeah, I mean, not that that's not worth doing sometimes.
Correct.
But yeah. Mm-hmm. That's one of the points that I see all the time. Anytime something like this comes up, one of the first responses that I see is, well, if you didn't like that contract, you shouldn't have signed it. And that's bullshit. Okay. Contract law exists for a reason. There are things that you legally cannot promise. One of the most important considerations, in fact, is the legal definition consideration in a contract that says that a contract must have consideration for both sides, and that means that both sides must be putting for something of value on the table. For example, I cannot sign a contract with you promising to provide something that I would have to do by law anyway in exchange for another service of value. That contract, because there would be no consideration on my side, is the legal term, would be thrown out in court by a judge. Now, and so that's the one thing that I like to say to all this is first of all, these people that are saying, well, that they shouldn't have signed the contract. First of all, what the hell are you doing? Like, if there's a side that you're going to jump in on here, yeah, isn't it the young people that have been hurt by this, that have promising careers ahead of them, that have like 100% of their equity in the game? Like, it just seems really odd to advocate on the other side to me. But
if you were to ask those people who say, want to be a pro player and are going, oh, why didn't this pro player sign it? And you say, oh, I'm going to give you $100,000 a year and the opportunity to compete, just sign this piece of paper. How many of them would say no? They're not putting themselves in the player's shoes.
Very hindsighty for a lot of fans, right? And again, but who do they watch? Do they watch the team org, or do they watch the players, right? So,
and I think that in esports, we have hard research now. It's shown it's the latter, but completely, and that's fine. but that's the thing. It's very odd to me that people would advocate on the side of the organizations in that discussion. And the other thing, like, if you are a player and you do find yourself on the wrong side of the contract, you're not necessarily beholden to this organization. You should still get a lawyer. Yep. But the flip side of that coin that is equally, if not more important, is it's about convenience. These things take time. These things, getting trapped in a bad contract, oftentimes you can get out of it, but it's a pain. And it can tie you up for months, if not years. And that's why I'm so like on board with what Scoots is doing, is like, look, these contracts, they may or may not hold up in a court of law. But in the meantime, while we're waiting to find out, you have young people whose careers are on hold in an industry that moves as fast as anything I've ever seen in business. Mm-hmm. And let's let these kids hit the reset button. If we want to do it again and do it right, fine. But let's not hold them up while you figure your shit out. Yeah. Yep.
And
again, like, this kind of stuff is why, it's one of the cornerstones of why the Counter-Strike guys, and we started the PA for the Counter-Strike guys, to give them a legal resource pre and during, right? Because half the good a lawyer can do is to walk a player through the contract before he signs it. Maybe not a single it's changed on that contract, but he puts it from legalese to layman terms for every clause. So the kid at least knows, okay, I know what I'm giving up. I know what I'm signing. I know how to get out. I know what a breach is. I know all these things now. I'm a far more educated person. I'm still going to sign, or I'm going to go back and poke about clause 4 and 5 a little bit, because now it's not just all a bunch of legalese. And my dad, who owns a multi-million-dollar construction business in California, read it, and it seems okay to him.
Right.
But now we can get guys like Ryan involved, and these player-specific lawyers that, again, are delving in. And again, so we pre it, and then obviously if you're already in one, we then go look at it and go, okay, this is what you signed. This is what it means. Oh, they haven't paid you in 2 months. Okay, this clause, they're breaching now, and here's how you remedy a breach.
Absolutely.
Right? But education, right?
And now the two things that I'll say to that. One is that if you ever buy a house, okay, I realize most of the people that are listening to this podcast probably haven't had that experience, but if you ever buy a house, by law, in every state that I'm aware of in the United States, both sides must have an attorney present and must have an attorney who's read that contract. And it's because our legal system is set up as an adversarial system. The responsibility of an attorney is to advocate for his side. Yes, these organizations, they have their attorneys and they write those contracts. But those contracts are written by attorneys whose responsibility it is to advocate for their clients, which is the organization. Yep. The player needs to have an advocate. That's how the system works. That's why we require at every trial that everybody gets a lawyer or a public defender if they can't afford an attorney of their own. That's the whole basis upon which most modern legal systems are founded, is the adversarial system and the idea that both sides are going to have competent representation. And a lot of times, to go with the house buying analogy, a lot of times that is the only role of your attorney, is to look at that contract and say, you know this, you need to have your payments in by this time on this month, or this is going to happen. And if this happens, if the neighborhood decides that they're going to build a sidewalk, you're going to have to help pay for it, But again, education is one of the most important roles of any responsible attorney. And it is of so much value in these situations. Yep. Just knowing what you are signing is so worthwhile. You would not buy a $500,000 house without having an attorney to read that contract. Nobody would. Yep. And yet you're talking, take Nessa's example. You're signing a contract that's going to pay you $100,000. That's the same magnitude, same order of magnitude in terms of the investment and the impact on your life, if not even greater. Mm-hmm. For goodness sake, get representation.
Yep.
My question.
It's cheaper than you think. Like I think people automatically, because if a kid's getting $500 a month or $1,000 a month, that's a little different than getting 20 grand a month, right? But a couple, an hour of an attorney's time, couple $100, give or take the lawyer, right? And again, like like that's why we're also like I fired back up with Ryan this idea of like can we figure out a proper legal pro bono system that all the players sided, because we've got player lawyers and we've got team lawyers, and again, like you said, they're both meant to even the playing field on both sides of this.
Yeah, right? Nobody's evil, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody. That's the way the system is set up, that the responsibility of the attorney is to advocate for the interests of their client. There's a reason, okay? This very common, we were talking about this off air, and this very common reaction on the part of a team owner, a player will read a contract and ask a question about a certain clause, and the team owner will say, well, our lawyers make us put it in there.
We just got to put that in there. We never have ever.
I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase.
That's the lawyer's job. They put it in there because it is advantageous to their client to have it in there. And the point is, even if you go get a lawyer, if they're not going to negotiate and say, oh, this has to be changed, you still need to know what the hell it means and how it could affect you.
Exactly. Education. And I hope like this gets up and running, because again, it's much harder for a player to find a lawyer he can trust, whereas teams have lawyers on retainers. So it's a no-brainer. Here's my lawyer. He's been with us for years. So the idea is this kid doesn't know where to go. Like I get DM'd all the time, like, hey, can you help me? And now I'm starting to build a little Rolodex of player, because you can't really be both. Most lawyers are one side or the other. No one's really doing the exact same legal worth for both sides, because that would be a little weird. So we're building a Rolodex in Counter-Strike. So if I get a kid that comes to me and goes, hey, I need a lawyer, I need an agent, here's people we trust, here's who we're vetting. You know, in sports, like this shit is legally vetted. Like you can't be an agent in the NFL if the Player Association hasn't vetted you and put you on the list. You can't just roll and be a player agent. So same kind of
that's another thing, by the way, that we really need to talk about in this particular podcast. But
we'll get to agents.
We'll get there. I've got it.
The other thing though that I'll say is you know, again, even if you're in that $500 to $1,000 a month, whatever category, where it doesn't necessarily make sense for you to retain an attorney or invest in a bunch of hours. Look, if you are reading a contract and you see something that looks suspicious and you have a couple sentences or a one paragraph, very direct, very specific question, DM one of us on Twitter. Yeah, okay. Sure. We're going to put you like, there are enough, I hope so, I think so. There are enough people in esports right now. There are people like Ryan Fairchild, people like Bryce Blum, Ryan Morrison. Again, they represent different sides, but there are enough people out there in esports that if you have a very direct question, is this particular thing a problem? Please just ask.
Yeah, because they're not going to hit the clock and start charging you by the second, right?
Yes.
They're not those kind of guys, right?
For goodness sakes, like all of us are thrilled. I am not going to try to answer a question like that, but I can put you in touch with somebody, maybe not even in esports. I can call my cousin, okay, who's a lead counsel for a big consulting firm, and he can at least tell me who to ask, all right? But we'll at least try and get that question answered for you, because if something in a contract is ringing an alarm bell in your head, it is worth you taking the 15 minutes it's going to take to fire off that email, DM, whatever.
Yeah, and another thing to think about that players don't think about at all. So let's go back to the guys that make $1,000 a month, right? So that's only like $12,000 a year, not a lot of money. So, but they all, like those 5 kids, let's say a Counter-Strike team, roughly going to sign the exact same legal contract, right? Names will change, addresses will change, but it's not like the clauses of release change. Maybe a buyout might change if you're a superstar on that team. Those 5 kids could pool their money instead of one guy paying that lawyer for an hour. The lawyer looks at the boilerplate and gives them all the info, right? So, and again, I think this resource thing that's fired back up, and you know, bless Bryce's heart, several years ago, him and a couple of lawyers were firing up this exact kind of resource, but then they all got really busy. Obviously, Bryce's business blew up. Snooper was involved. He got really busy with Facebook and then other stuff. So it kind of went by the wayside, but I think it's going to get resurged. I think now there's even more lawyers that are willing to help. And then you just have a resource that everybody trusts. Hey, kid, go see these guys. They're going to hook you up. They'll give you the basics. And maybe if you need if you need the negotiation powers and you need someone to sit there and really fight for you, that maybe cost you some money.
Well, just seeing how fast Ryan Fairchild, for example, has become a known name. Like it was a year ago, almost, a year and a couple of months ago, that I was at a LAN in DC and I met him for the first time, and like nobody knew who he was.
Yep.
And I was going around, I introduced him to like OG and stuff. And, you know, it was like, look, this guy he's a lawyer from North Carolina. He seems like a really cool dude. He knows the things that he's saying make a lot of sense to me, you know, wants to get into this area. And now all of a sudden somebody tells me about a problem and I'm like, oh, do you know this guy? Oh yeah, we're actually already talking to him, which is exactly what happened with a certain Dota situation very recently. They're like, oh yeah, we already called him.
So I have a question for Scoots here.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
So you started the Player Association. You have all these resources. Ryan's blown up. Talking to lawyers is actually a thing. Have you noticed a significant difference in teams and their contracts and how they're approaching players? Are you scaring them enough that they're actually not?
I would say not yet.
Okay.
I think we got some contract cycles to get through. You know, because a lot of these Counter-Strike contracts are like 2-3 years in duration. So sometimes like they signed before this thing even existed. And we're still getting up and running, right? Like our lawyers are coming up with what we think is the perfect contract, right? In a perfect world, if we could write the player to team contract, here's what it would look like, much like sports, right? The lawyers involved in the PA are sports lawyers, right? That's where they come from player associations in sports. Like our CEO of the Player Association is on the FIFA Pro board, which is the player association of FIFA. Right. So they're very much befuddled and very much blown away by what they read and see in our world.
Yes.
Like we use the term Wild West. Like that's not even a fucked up enough word for them.
No, they think they're like, hey, look, there goes a T-Rex.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we're going to start with that. Like this is a perfect world. And then obviously there's a huge compromise in between that.
And it's not easy.
We're not seeing much. And they obviously do it more than I, so I'm probably not even the best guy for the exact nuances being changed than our lawyers. I think in some regards, our players are smarter already, even without a PA, because the pedigree of a Counter-Strike player goes way back. So I think they're already starting to get it better, right? In the sense of things to ask for, things to look for, because we already fight for sticker revenue and revenue out of some of these leagues. So we're, and this is where I feel bad for a brand new esport like PUBG or Fortnite, because these kids are like going from 0 to 60, right? Counter-Strike has 20 years of teams fucking players over and doing or doing great by players, right? It does go both ways. So I think in some regards we have an older player base and maybe a little bit more educated player base. Like you talk to a guy like Taz, right? Taz has been burned by more teams in his lifetime in Counter-Strike than probably almost anyone else in Counter-Strike for sure. So just a lot more good and bad to lean on in that sense.
And it's if you do any consulting in other industries, that's one of the things you notice is when you first asked that question, Yessa, right? The boilerplate contract can be a very sticky thing. It can take a long time to change. In terms of what I've seen in other areas, the short-term path to improvement is typically client education. It's typically it's that the most troublesome clauses in those contracts, the clients actually say, no, you know what, this boilerplate contract, it might not be the best thing for me, but here's a clause and here's a clause and here's a clause that if those are in there as is, I absolutely will not sign. And that's where the short-term impact is. And then the medium-term impact comes as the contract starts being reworked, restructured, and homogenized across the league.
And frankly, as it all gets bigger and more popular and the viewerships go up on all these games, the leverage will continue to shift into these.
We hope so, yeah.
Right? So education and then using your leverage to try to find the best. Because a contract should kind of leave both sides wanting, right? Like that, it's not necessarily I got everything I wanted or the team owner going, I got everything I wanted. In the middle, you're both going to be a little cranky, but it's going to be better for all of you.
Right.
So I think, again, education leads, and then as this keeps growing, you have some leverage to say no, like you said, clause 5, ain't signing it. And then a team owner goes, oh shit, well, I really need these players. I need to rethink this clause 5 and maybe I can dump it.
Now, it is interesting, and the couple things I'll add to that discussion is it's not – The picture, unfortunately, is not all rosy because number one,
am I painting a rosy picture? Fuck.
No,
My reputation right now.
We started to sound a little optimistic, and so my inner economist is like,
Yeah,
no.
it's like, no, I do not allow this to happen.
So no, look.
Storm cloud incoming.
Let's restart. Cut.
So number one is you have to emphasize over and over again to people that esports is highly heterogeneous, and that the contract templates that might make sense for CSGO, for example, would probably make no sense for Fortnite. And so it's going to be an ever evolving kind of battle that we're fighting here. And number two, guys.
Serious. He scooted in close.
Do it. Do it.
No. I'm not going to go in quite as hard as I intended to there. That would have required me calling people out that I'm not really allowed to call out. Let's just say, okay, again, organizations are tracking different titles too, and there have been instances where organizations have said, oh, well, you know what, if they've literally said to players during negotiations, oh, you know what, well, if you want this in your contract, we can just go over and sign this kid in this other esport who doesn't know any better. So you better sign this, or we're just going to go. You know what? My experience in business is frankly that when someone takes that tack, that you say thank you very much and you go somewhere else. It really
by that. Yeah.
I get why people would say that as a team owner. If you are looking at the hard baseline facts, the cold hard facts of ROI, you have to be aware in esports that you've got only so big a pot, and there are a lot of potential chunks that you might want to invest in, but don't allow yourself to be swayed by that negotiating tactic. You say, look, I'm very much interested in talking with you, but if you want to go sign somebody playing Fortnite instead of signing a Dota team, so be it. I still want a fair contract for me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, and you have to hope there's even a contract in the first place. So we're sitting here talking about player salaries and, franchising, advertising shares, sticker shares, and everything. But, for those of us coming from the Dota world, where, a lot of the money is coming from tournament prize pools,
right?
There's no contract there. I mean, when you qualify, say you qualify to a Valve event, say you qualify to multiple Valve events, there's still no guarantee you're even going to get paid. And so we're sitting here talking about how great it is to look at your contracts, while in 2019, insert current year meme, we still have tournaments that are not paying out. So the Rivalry Dota account, likes to do these on this day tweets to give people some nostalgia. And I did a very intentional one about GESC. JStorm won their GESC Valve Minor about a year ago, a year and a week ago. And this was a Valve endorsed tournament. So they provided half of the prize pool. And the teams that are speaking up, now they're not all speaking up, Team Secret never said anything, for example, have not been paid at all. Not even, I even was very specific. I replied and I said, how about the Valve half of them? Nothing. They've been paid nothing. And then Talent have been speaking up and they have been paid nothing in a Valve sponsored event where you think you have some kind of reliance on prize money.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. A lot of the interesting discussion here to me as an economist is this adversarial system that we were talking about and how exactly it's going to function in different esports. And this, to me, tournament payouts are tough, right? Because there's a lot of parties involved, and this is one of the few areas, though, where it ought to be straightforward. Okay, one of the big arguments in favor of the first-party systems like Riot's and like Blizzard's for Overwatch, you can say what you want. There are all kinds of problems there, and nobody is going to agree with you more strongly than me. But one of the big advantages is the agency is clear, that who's underwriting the whole process is clear. My own opinion is that when you have a developer that's going with a third-party model, like Valve does for Dota and for Counter-Strike, okay, where its events are run, with the exception of TI for Dota, the majors, and then everything for Counter-Strike is run by people that aren't Valve. Valve's just kicking in in Dota, it's just the prize pools. In CS, it's actually also some other costs as well. There is a level, I think, of underwriting responsibility taken on by the developer there. And that's where I mentioned this on our last podcast with Jack. I would like to see Valve step up and say, hey, part of the TI revenue this year is going to go to pay off those players and talent that didn't get paid last year. And I would expect, if the same thing happened at a CSGO major, I would expect the same thing to happen, that as a developer, if you are saying we are going to be involved in this circuit, we are going to offer promotions to the game client, we're going to pocket some of the revenue, that there is some underwriting responsibility that's taken on there.
And
I agree. And Counter-Strike, I mean, knock on wood, it seems like our tier 1, the top dogs and those TOs, for the most part, the ones that we see every week at least, not the once a year TOs like WESG, right? Tend to do pretty well by the players in the sense of when they get their prize purse. I have heard some horror stories, and I lived a few horror stories when I was on the road as talent doing desk work, that take forever to get your paycheck. 90 days turn to 120 days, turn to, we have a new account system, it's going to be 60 more days.
If you look at my bills, like, it's like, holy shit, thank God I'm a professor, and thank God my wife has a professional job. Like, if you were literally living month to month as esports talent, it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, you'd be screwed.
Yeah, and I think that is still a little bit of an issue on the talent side of Counter-Strike, but I don't hear any grumblings, again, on the tier 1 level of players, again, other than like the event in China. It seems to be notoriously either pays later and doesn't pay. And that's why a lot of teams decide not to go this time. Like, you can dangle $1 million in front of me, but like, if you didn't already pay last year,
right? If you still owe the guys that won last year,
you can look who went last year and who went this year. Like, it's not quite the same set of teams. Some went, but a lot of the big ones dropped. But then you get down to that tier 2, tier 3 level of TOs, and that's probably a really murky world in Counter-Strike, just like everywhere else. Like, if there's probably a lot of money owed to the semi-pro level when it comes to prize money. And again, I've been tooting this horn to Valve for years. Like, can you have a little bit more control over your licensing for all sorts of reasons? Like, we want our calendar controlled better, right? Because 9 tournament organizers are not going to get together and play nice. They're all going to step on each other because, again, they have a business to run. The more Counter-Strike you do, the more money you make, right? It's a content producer thing, right? Like,
and when you have tournament organizers who own some of the teams,
that's a whole other show. But so thankfully, I'm not hearing, hey, ESL hasn't paid us our prize money. FaZe hasn't paid our prize money. We're not hearing that at the top level. But one of the things we started talking about as a PA was the idea of protecting this prize money, right? And it's kind of the opposite side of let's come up with a standardized contract that players have with team owners. We're coming up with a standardized set of agreements that we do with tournament organizers.
Right. Everything
from player conditions to hotel rooms to travel to what's your practice room like, all quality of life stuff, tournament stuff. So again, because they go everywhere for everybody. So let's standardize that experience. If I'm at a DreamHack event, it's really similar in my mind as a player. Maybe prize money's different and all that's different than it's an ESL event, than it is a FaZe. Like our playing field is even. So we even started saying, okay, well, we don't have to worry about ESL not paying prize money, but what about the next ESL that comes in with $50 million as a tournament organizer and wants to be a TO? Well, we want to be able to hand them a plan and say, if you want to throw a Counter-Strike tournament, start with this, what the players need. And even the idea of, let's put your prize money in escrow. Let's make it safe for you and safe for the players. Don't dangle $1 million and try to get us all excited. Let's put that in an escrow account. Everyone gets guaranteed. Now,
it's something that I argued for last year.
And how that didn't happen. I mean, where did that $150,000 from Valve? Well, $300,000 because it's 2 tournaments.
Well, okay.
Where did it go?
They don't have the money. They don't have the money in advance to put it.
Let's dial it back, right? Because show me where else in esports that is happening. Fortunately, unfortunately, we can talk all we want about coulda, woulda, shoulda, but that is not the industry standard yet. I agree with Scott that it ought to be. Okay.
Would be nice.
And here's the thing, right? I think, to me, that could end up not scaring people away, but actually doing the opposite. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, you got somebody with a pile of money that wants to host a tournament, has no idea what to do. A lot of times, unfortunately, they're going to end up in the hands of one of these esports consultants from LinkedIn. Okay.
Yep.
You all of a sudden you have a standard tournament organizer set of contracts, and it at least gives some structure to somebody that's looking at, hey, I potentially want to hold an event or get my name on an event in this industry. I think
it's kind of like if you're going to do here's your Counter-Strike 101, right? ESL's already learned it. We're already working with them on standards and all the current ones. But again, we even have an open ecosystem. So again, ESPN could decide to go after Turner Sports and do their own version of an E-League. So hey, great. Would love to have you do Counter-Strike. Here's how you should start so you don't make all the same mistakes that these guys have all made over the years in FaZe.
And here's the other thing that it does. The reason, my belief is, the reason that we went from 9 majors and 12 or 13 minors, whatever it was last year, back down to 5 and 5 this year in Dota, was that Valve looked at events like GESC and said, we don't want to do that due diligence. We don't want to be responsible for going to everybody that is going to hold an event in our system and checking them out. Well, guess what? You have that standardized set of requirements. You have that, hey, this amount of money, your half the prize money needs to be posted in an escrow account 90 days before the start of the play date of the tournament. All of a sudden, that takes the case-by-case burden of due diligence off of the developer. And that's again, when you talk about, if you want to have the theory crafting discussion, right? As an economist, it's very interesting in terms of how the legal structures are going to evolve in these different esports, because in regular sports, you're not in the situation where you have explicit assignment of intellectual property rights hanging over everything, right? There are things that you can get away with. There are contract structures that are viable in traditional sports that would not work in esports, because in esports, the developer has absolute intellectual property rights. They can do a lot that there is no entity in traditional sports powerful enough to do. And that's, again, that's why it's not necessarily as simple as going and finding really good attorneys from the really good agents from the regular sports rules. This is a truly new landscape. It's hard.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. But again, that to me argues even more strongly for let's not if there's one thing that I see all over working in different parts of esports, working as talent, now working a little bit on the business side, there is so much reinventing of the goddamn wheel.
Yeah. And one of my things is like, okay, Valve or whoever, if you don't want to pre-vet in the sense of, okay, we're going to do due diligence before we even give you a license, and that's a pain in the ass. We'd have to have a department to do that. At least when it's documented, at least do the investigation after the fact. If you've got a tournament organizer that you did give a license to that has not met its obligations and continues to not and makes no plans to, don't let them use your game again. Like let them burn let them burn the industry once if that's how you want to be, but then never give them a license again. At least do that, right? And again, it doesn't necessarily happen that way. And obviously, every TO handles their relationship with the developer and the IP differently. But again, and every developer kind of handles their licensing differently. But Valve is very laissez-faire, right? Go ahead. Like, we have an automated system. Go ahead and fill it in on the web. And again, I could roll in tomorrow and throw a $5 million tournament for Counter-Strike here in Phoenix. Valve wouldn't care. They'd be like, yeah, go for it.
Go for it. Great. Yeah.
Anybody could, not just me. So again, if you're not going to pre-check and pre-do due diligence on who you give license to, then at least when it's blatantly obvious and it's reported on and you can investigate that they didn't hold up their end of the bargain of your license, deny them. Stop giving it to them, because all you're doing is reinforcing bad behavior at that point, right?
Well, we saw that
on the goddamn head, right?
We saw that the Fallout Gaming Galaxy Battles event in Dota. The first round of it was a complete disaster. Gosh, is that the one? That's not the one where the PC like blew up or melted on Dendy or whatever. That was a different event.
That was what?
That was a WCA?
No, I think that was like the major All-Stars.
Yeah, it was something. But the first Galaxy Battles, Fallout game, whatever event was a disaster. It was a well publicized disaster with horrible conditions for the teams and all of these issues. And then it comes around again and they won the second, and Valve gave them a major. So it wasn't even a lack of vetting. It was they vetted them and went, here you go, running it. Like they were going to give them $500,000, and it took significant community outrage, investigative journaling, and I think
no, it didn't.
Well,
no.
It took the drug thing.
It is in a way we got perversely lucky. And I really like Ari Naiman and other people, because the Philippines is an awesome place, and I was there from the Manila Major, and we all had a great time, and I fervently hope to go back there. So this isn't a dig on that. But in a way, we did get lucky that the government in the Philippines adopted this very odd and very strict doping policy that ended up being the focal point for that tournament being declassified as a major, because I was talent in the first Galaxy Battles. I was there at Shenzhen, and these guys they most of them had their heart in the right place. They were trying, but the event was. I have never in my life been that happy to get back to my hotel room at the end of the day just to wash my hands. It was just disgusting, and again, that's the frustration that so many of us have with Valve, is that if you'd have asked anybody that had been to that event, it would have been, look, there are some guys there that are trying to do the right thing. This is a TO that that maybe down the road will be ready, but giving them a major this year, wow, no, okay, that's the frustration. Is that listen to the people on the ground, right? That have been there on the different sides of the experience.
Yeah, and they almost went the opposite and rewarded them with even a greater thing, right? And one of the things that we've talked about on the Counter-Strike side, and again, a lot of this stuff is like want to do long-term plan stuff, because again, we're not always fighting with the team owners. In some regards, when it comes to TOs, it's players and teams are very united because they need the same things out of that event, right? That's when they unite. So maybe we get to a point where between a player association and team association, we're actually sanctioning tournament organizers, or we're not going, right?
Yeah.
Like if Valve's not going to do it, then we'll do it. And again, I think that's a long ways away, but maybe we get to that. You're abiding by this standard of tournaments we've given you. Team owners are abiding by the player team owner contract changes. Stamp of approval by both to come to your event in China, or no stamp. No one's coming. And then you wouldn't throw the event, right? Because you're not going to throw a really expensive event and have tier 3 teams there, because it would be not worth your while. But again, that's that kind of leverage that takes years to kind of shift.
And I'm glad, I'm glad you put it that way, because I think that's what a lot of people lose sight of, is that these unions, I really prefer to stay away from the term union. I think Players Association is the right moniker. It's a level of credibility that builds up over time. And we are so used to everything in esports happening so quickly, and a year in esports being 5 in most other forms of competition in most other industries. But there are some things that just don't work like that. And fortunately and unfortunately, I think the Players Association is one, and I think you guys have the right idea in Counter-Strike. Is this is something that needs to happen organically. It needs to happen because the big players in the scene all buy in and recognize that this is something that is in all of our best interests. And as they're bringing up younger players, they're saying, look, you want to do this because let me tell you how it was in our day before we had this.
Back in the day,
we walked uphill both ways in the snow.
Yeah, it's like traditional sports, but it took baseball 100 years to have their power.
Again, that's the thing.
Way ahead of this.
I don't think people appreciate how long and what it took for these unions to arise in traditional sports, and just how delicate the balance of power is. And that's the thing. In some ways, these different esports are in some ways more complicated than the traditional sports power structure, because you have this IP umbrella hanging over everything. It's not clear if that publisher, if that game developer tomorrow says, we don't like this Players Association, they're barred from our scene.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not clear that there's recourse.
Valve could have just said, who the fuck? Yeah, we don't care. But thankfully, we built a nice relationship. But yeah, they could literally make it ineffective.
But this is the thing.
As good team owners.
We have a Players Association in baseball because baseball had to get an antitrust exemption. And that was one of the conditions.
Yep.
Like, people don't understand. This is not a trivial matter of let's get a bunch of guys together and hey, there we go. No, this requires, as I'm sure Scoots is painfully aware, this requires a lot of work by a lot of people with a very deep knowledge of the power structure of the scene. And it's going to have to arise in different ways in different esports.
Yep, for sure.
This is also something that's, I would say, come to more of a head now, because if you look at how games are structured, they actually have longevity. CS, just go, whatever you want to say, CS has been around for 20 years. Dota's been, we'll say, around for 15 or so. And there's actual longevity in games to create mature enough players to want an association and to go after these things.
It's weird though, because with that, you're starting to get a large enough time series sample to start to say things in some of these titles. But then that we're hitting critical mass in the time series at the same time where there's this just extreme cross-sectional volatility coming in from competitions with games like Fortnite, and they're blowing up so quickly that all of us are going, oh, we've been doing the same thing for 20 years, but are we all dumb? Like, should we be all chasing the 12-year-olds with their Switches? I mean, that's kind of the thing. That's what it's what makes esports really compelling to me, looking at it as an economist. But it's also the reason why you have to have a lot of humility, to me, and a lot of respect to do well in this industry, because it's like trading in the market, man. It's going to kick your ass some days.
Oh yeah.
And you got to be okay with that, and you got to be willing. I got my ass kicked on day 5 of Watch, and you got to be willing to get up in day 6 and hit
the button again, for sure.
Day 80 or however many you end up getting to.
That's what you're signing up for. That's the thing. I don't want to mislead. Like, I tell my students about esports now, because what the hell is the point? Like, they all got Twitter, right? But that's the thing. I try to be honest and say I think it's a tremendously exciting industry, but it's also like, it's the same speech I used to give to my MBA students about, y'all are going to get these big money offers from tech and pharmaceutical startups, and the number one thing you need to ask yourself is, do you have the personality type that's going to be willing to cope with the day-to-day volatility and the uncertainty?
Yep.
Sorry,
yeah.
I probably got two there.
I mean, day-to-day volatility and uncertainty, that sounds about esport. That's wrapped it up rather nicely. We don't need to have a show anymore. You just.
But it's fun though, right? That's the thing. It's really like.
Wild West was a good time, man. Wild West was a really good time.
Hey, wait, but are we Wild West or are we dinosaurs?
We're dinosaurs riding around.
And hey, I was gonna say, I'm not putting me in that dinosaur we. By the way, that's
it's a crossover episode.
Okay, so
Lost meets Wild West.
I think the important topic to then move on to is discussing what happens when you have a contract and when you maybe have an agent, and are your agents actually agents? So what I'm hinting at here is we're gonna do the launching point here. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, we're gonna do the launching point here is Tfue is currently suing FaZe, challenging FaZe, suing. Whatever, suing. Okay, so full out suing FaZe because he believes, and he's probably right, that his contract is going against California law that FaZe encourages illegal things from its members, that he's forced to live in the team house, that he's forced to only accept deals through FaZe. And Tfue is huge in Fortnite. He's won a lot of titles, is incredibly successful. So the fact that he's paying some 80% fee to FaZe and not eligible to seek out deals on his own is incredibly damaging to his income. And so this is, this popped up like right before we started recording today. So this is going to be big in the news for a while. Yeah, until this gets resolved. And so, where do you guys want to jump in here? We can talk about bad contracts. We can talk about agents and California law. That's up to you.
The agent thing is going to be, it's an issue that was going to come up sooner rather than later. It's an issue that we talk about in different contexts. Every time there's an esports event, there are multiple jurisdictional laws that you potentially can come up against. In a very different way, we ran up against this with China and potentially players getting banned, right? Mm-hmm. One of the problems is we have a lot of actors in esports that are now offering talent representation services, and the nature of the services that they offer and the contracts that are being signed place them in a role analogous to that played by, say, agents in professional sports. And there are states like California, because of Hollywood, because of other industries that have developed in California, those types of services are very, very heavily regulated in those states. And
it's important to note as well, I just cut you off for a second for people listening. We're not just talking about talent agencies, like Code Red or something like that is the first one that comes to mind. We're talking about talent agencies, individual representation, and teams that are signing deals for their players. That is important to keep in mind. All right, sorry, continue.
Again, that's part of the problem when we talk about the fact that esports is so heterogeneous, and the power structures and the nature of the incentives and agency, in different esports being different. At the end of the day, there are very tight restrictions in states like California on what you have to have a license for and the kinds of services that you can provide without a license in terms of you representing somebody else as talent. All right, net broadcast talent, players, even to some extent, people behind the scenes. I am surprised that we haven't run up against it before now, but one of the truisms of business is that, money's a great catalyst. And when you look at a game like Fortnite, what we were just saying about cross-sectional volatility segues into this as well, that the amounts of money involved in these games, such as Fortnite, are going to mean that those games almost unavoidably are going to put some aspects of esports under a microscope that we've all sort of suspected might be problems for some time.
Yeah, and it actually even this teams acting as agents but not legally being able to do that in California is not a new thing.
No,
what's new is a player suing and it being part of the legal precedent that he's trying to set. I had left EG already, but there were some legitimate agents in California that had other teams as their clients, and they used EG as an example, saying these guys are a good game. They're not really agents in California. It's when they're being bought by Twitch, right? And they were trying to throw mud at EG, and again, legally valid point, but everyone around that was throwing the mud also is the same kind of thing, right? So it was for political gain more than actual reality. So you've got this thing that teams are signing players, streamers, all sorts of people, and acting literally legally and by nature of this contract as their agent, right? That's been talked about for a while. Now, another thing that goes hand in hand with that is in California, especially speaking of regulations, if a person in your, I'm going to use the word employee, but that word doesn't accurately represent. But if the core of your business is X, and these people are X, those people in the state of California cannot be independent contractors. They have to be employees.
Right.
You can't So if you have 50 players that travel the world for you in California, and your core is a professional team of players, those players technically by law should be employees of your business, not independent contractors. So that's another side to this legality of a team structure, right? And teams have started, like Riot, started making teams, at least for league players, sign them as employees so they didn't break those laws, right?
Gee.
LCS and those guys started pushing that. Now, that doesn't mean that the exact same team that signs 5 League of Legends players as employees didn't still sign 45 other players as independent contractors last year, right? So, and on the Counter-Strike side, you know, obviously, like I'm big about these contracts getting a little more parity, right? And I literally, without naming names, a very prominent team owner, CEO/owner of a team, and I had a conversation about, in Counter-Strike, what I want to do for a team owner is lower their labor costs, right? I used to be a team, right? I want to lower Team X's labor cost. And the easiest way to do that is to give a player some of his agency back, give him some of his naming rights and his likeness back, so he has the reason to have an agent, right? Having a lawyer, everybody needs. An agent, it goes and shops you, it goes and sells you what, and the first thing it would be he'd be an agent on your team contract. But again, also maybe going to get you a watch sponsorship or a hat sponsorship or all these different things that, again, in sports, we have a very nice separation of church and state between, well, maybe not nice, but there is a legal and a much better separation between what the team can do with LeBron James's stuff and what LeBron James can do with his stuff are very separated. LeBron James can go get a sponsorship that his team owner can't say a word about. Team gets involved if they want LeBron in his uniform or they want to use the logos of said company.
To be clear, right, there are still issues surrounding this in traditional sports as well.
For sure.
Like one of the big, you know, one of the suits right now going on is this idea that players' tattoos, right? There are these games like NCAA basketball, NBA basketball that are published where the players are very faithfully reproduced in the game, and some of them including their tattoos, and the tattoo artists are saying, "Wait a minute." Right. Yeah. So this is. I
mean, more standardized. Like.
Oh no, I know. It's that's what I'm saying though is more as a prelude to. This is not an easy question, okay, and it's something that I've thought a lot about recently, included because brand equity has to be one of the single biggest, if not the biggest variable in terms of the recipe for long-term stability in most of these esports. We have to create incentives for both organizations and players to be developing brand equity. And
absolutely,
anytime you talk about that, and that's your prescription to success, the number one question that we teach our students to ask is, how does ownership of that equity accrue as value develops? And that is something we're gonna have to pay very close attention to in terms of contracts, in terms of, because who owns the rights that, like, can Arteezy, Evil Geniuses has a deal with Xfinity, right? Mm-hmm. Can Arteezy go out and sign a separate deal with another media company that may be their competitor?
Yeah, it'd be like AT&T. Is
that spelled out in a contract somewhere? Probably.
Yes. But generally, most of these contracts, every single vertical, this is what I'm talking about saving a team money. So let's say you got a player that your team is paying $15,000 a month, which in Counter-Strike is absolutely not unheard of at all. So that's a big cost, times 5 plus a coach. That's a big monthly hard cost to a team owner, right? So, and again, I want to allude to this conversation I had with a team owner, right? Very prominent team, great guys. You know, like, again, not trying to throw them under the bus, but the conversation was, I want to save you money. So if you're playing a kid 15 grand, but you own every vertical, right? And again, this goes back to them acting as agents. They grab every goddamn verticals they don't sell yet. You know, from shoes.
Yes, how could you not?
I mean, how could you not, right? But if you're gonna take that from a kid, then you need to go sell that for the kid. If you take it and sit on it, you're actually leaving money on the table for both of you. My speech to these owners is, look, let's figure out the cores you need to have control over, and the ones that you're holding on to because, again, we're never going to use it, but it's in the clause. Let's get some separation there, because I'm going to say to that kid, make your team pay you 10 grand, not 15 grand a month, and you go find that 5 grand off of this now tree that's open to you. But right now, nothing, well, very few players have any agency. It's all goes one way. So in having this conversation with this team owner, he goes, but Scott, like, we pitch ourselves as the agent. So we have to have all this. This is who we are. And I literally, it's so funny, this lawsuit, I looked him dead in the ie. I go, but in the state of California, are you an agent? Exactly. Like right in his face, right? And he's like, And I'm like, that's also the problem. I said, if you were an agency, and I don't give a shit about the legality, right? The lawyers will fight the legality of it. But if you're going to act as an agency, then you need about 50 agents in your business that activate and help all your players, right? But they don't do that. They activate on the big brand, and they activate maybe on a player here and there, right? And the idea is,
I think that's very important. And I want to see on a different side of it. I want to see the incentives.
Yeah, and
I want to see the incentives in those contracts. Where's the incentive that says, hey, if the team doesn't sell a sponsorship in terms of this, then you have the right to pursue that yourself. Or
and there's core, like it would be really hard to break the peripheral market, right? That's a big sponsorship for an entire brand of a team. They get an NVIDIA, they get a Logitech, or they get a Razer, and it blankets all their players. Like in a perfect world, though, that is actually the first one that should go, because that's your golf clubs, right? That is your cleats. That is the most important thing to a player. And oftentimes they're forced to use gear that, in their mind, placebo or not, is not the gear they would choose to use, right?
Agreed.
Depending on what game you play, different peripherals are more important. Counter-Strike, it's the mouse, right? Some games, if you're into StarCraft, it's the keyboard, right? Headset, no one really gives that much shit about, as long as the audio is good, right? So again, help me help you, team owners. Let's carve out stuff that the players can have. Because again, if I'm Zipnix from Astralis, right, and I sell a goddamn Rolex sponsorship, obviously Rolex is going to want me in my Astralis gear. They're going to want to do stuff around me and that brand. That gets Astralis involved. They'll get a little piece of that because their logos are getting involved.
But that's, again,
hang on. And you're growing. You're basically growing two brands at once, right?
I agree.
Perfect world, right? You're growing two brands at once, and right now, this is shit that no one is. I'm not asking for them to say, "Give me the goddamn mouse contract," but give me the shit you're not fucking activating on, because your business isn't built to activate on that. And I'm going to save you money, and you're going to have a happier player, and that player can build his brand together with you. And so in 5 years, if he spins off, he's now a much bigger kid, because he had some of these ideals, right?
And here's the thing, right? There are multiple ways to go about enhancing value in that situation. And it's not necessarily having look at what basketball teams do with shoes, right? Yes. Basketball teams, yes, every Duke basketball player, including famously this season Zion Williamson, when it blew out on him, wears Nikes. But what happens is that, Nike has a lot of these teams in the NBA as well as in college that are signed, we only wear Nike products. But the idea is, you a big enough team, Nike sends somebody to your campus and says, okay, I'm going to make a shoe for that kid. I'm going to make a shoe for that kid. I'm going to make a shoe for that kid. And you know what happens is that all of a sudden, 5 years down the line, when that kid blows up, they're now selling Kyrie Irving sneakers alongside Michael Jordan. I am waiting for that to happen. I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for it to happen that, oh, darn, my player prefers Razer products, but we happen to have a contract with SteelSeries. As a team owner, what you ought to be doing is getting on the damn phone and saying, hey, SteelSeries, I got this kid who I think is going to be a superstar. We're signed with you, but he doesn't like your mouse. You send somebody down and you make this kid a mouse, because 5 years down, 5 years, 6 months down the road, when this kid wins a major, you're selling the fucking Arteezy mouse. Yeah, and you're making money.
My mouse showed up with Sumail settings on it.
Duh.
I pulled it up. I opened up the SteelSeries customization to adjust the DPI, and I had normal settings and I had Sumail settings.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Honestly, I mean, this is why I think
Okay.
people tell me that, oh God, there's esports is blowing up because there's all this money in Fortnite. I'm saying no, you don't understand. Esports is blowing up because I think we're leaving billions of dollars of value on the table in titles that have been around for a decade or more.
That's my thing. Like, I think both sides, again, like I used to be a team owner. So like I want to fight a lot of things in these contracts that I think are unfair in some regards, buyouts, et cetera, and like standardizations. But this is just like, you guys are not built to activate for every player like an agent would. So let them have some of it back and they will go hire them. Because everyone always says, get a lawyer, get an agent. But if an agent has nothing to go sell, that's like they have no care to help a player because there's no money in it for them. Lawyers are a different kind of financial structure of how they get paid. But an agent gets paid on what he brings to you, right? And if he's got nothing to go ship, and that's why streamers are blowing up because they're not attached in this way to their organization. So a Pop Dog, all these guys can go out and get these huge deals because they're unencumbered. So I just
line in the Wall Street Journal, these guys are getting paid $50,000 an hour to play video games. And guess what? Everybody out there is going to want to take aim at that figure. I think it should be more.
It will be more.
I mean, you look, Apex's launch, we know, is in large part due to streamer promotion and streamers playing it. We know that game blew up because they shelled out the money and they made sure that the right names were playing their game at launch, and that's all anyone could talk about. We know that that's invalid.
One of the essays I read about Apex was there was somebody, I thought it was a really smart comparison that compared Apex's launch to the way that Eminem did his recent CD. I thought it was dead on.
Yeah.
It's there. We are learning, right? There are people in esports are figuring out. Well, I think we are at a critical juncture, we've reached critical mass in a lot of different ways, and you're going to see some of these ways to add value come to the table. Again, though, with every little additional channel to add value, there comes extra potential for bad actors. There comes extra potential for adverse incentives, and the things that we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation come back into play. Like, representation is only going to matter more as all of these things come online.
Exactly.
But fortunately, the representation is also getting better.
Yeah, so but this Tfue thing that blew up today, like he's hitting them for all sorts of things, right? Part of it is
there's a whole laundry list.
Yeah, they're not really an agency, but they act as an agency. The contract makes them an agent, and so that might get them in California law, legal trouble. You know, like you said, doing dangerous things. Now, like
there's something about a minor lying about his age.
He was probably loving doing the dangerous shit when he was doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, like after the fact, like they forced me, but he probably wasn't forced. And again, I haven't read the actual lawsuit, just kind of read the Hollywood report of it. But again, like we've been saying for years, like someone's going to walk one of these contracts in. Either a team's going to sue a player for breaching and quitting, which we always went, well, that probably will never happen because some of these contracts are of a gray nature that if I'm a team owner, I might not want to walk my contract into in a court of law. And then will a player ever have the power, the leverage, the confidence, the money, because obviously Tfue makes a bunch of money regardless of what FaZe is taking, to actually bring action, and he's going for it. This will be precedent setting. He's going after FaZe.
Well,
he's not going after, like,
I actually hope it won't be. That's the thing. What I hope happens here is that this thing gets settled nice and quietly, and some change gets enacted, because you got to be real. You know, having a wife that works with lawyers every day now.
Yeah, it could break our world. If
that's the thing.
It goes to precedent. I'm with
you. Precedent is a dangerous thing, because you let that thing actually get up in front of a judge, and what that judge says becomes the law.
It could void like hundreds of kids' contracts in California instantly.
Yes, that's the thing.
Does Denial have any contracts there?
I'm trying to remember. Theirs might be Nevada, because they're focused in Vegas, but I don't remember the top line of their contracts where they're, incorporated under.
It's like, because that could cut your watch short, at least.
Yeah. A lot of I don't mind waking up every morning and sending my tweet off. But yeah, you're right. Precedent, Alan, could really actually be much better if we clean our own house, if you will, than
That's again that you want to talk about speeches that you've been given to team owners. That is one that I myself have given, and that's that it is really beholden to all of us to get our I's dotted and T's crossed here, because I do think that this industry is only getting bigger, and I'm not talking about the whole Newzoo total revenue kind of thing. I could give a shit less about that. What I mean is that I think there are revenue channels that are going to be opening up across a lot of different esports titles that are going to create the potential for value being added, like live streamers are adding value. Okay,
absolutely.
To different products. But we need to make sure that as those channels open up, that we start to take things a little bit more seriously and have these I's dotted and T's crossed, because the money involved is going to start to be being real big. And when that happens, all of a sudden, these loopholes, these "oh, trust me" kind of moments, man, you can have one person with bad intentions screw it up for a whole lot of folks.
Yeah, and I think it's like gone are the days of us going, like, I just had a conversation last week with someone, like, is it a fad? Is this thing a fad? Like, whether it's, I'm like, esports isn't a fad. It's been determined by decades now that people, and more every day, absolutely take their entertainment in watching somebody else play a video game well, right? Yep. But now, we obviously, the Twitch side of it and just the live streaming influencer side of it takes that even to a different notch of people in a huge number globally will watch people play video games, period. Good, bad, shitty, horrible at the game. As a piece of entertainment, this is ascending right next to television, right next to everything else, right? I mean,
look, people are gonna listen to that and they're going, oh, haha, sure. No, it's true. No, honestly, it
is an entertainment. People are people fucking are cutting the cords because of Twitch. Yeah. They're not getting cable subscriptions. Netflix is blowing up the world of distribution. All these things are changing. But I think again, people watching other people play video games, whether they're good or shitty, is only going to get bigger.
And here's the thing, way too many people still, when they're looking at esports broadcasts, way too many people are still looking at these as products that are engineered for the game's player base. And more what we're seeing, if you look at the kind of viewership numbers that MSI just got in League of Legends, if you look at the kind of viewership numbers that Overwatch League is getting, it's very, very clear that a big and increasing portion of these viewer bases aren't actually hardcore players of the game. How many NFL fans do you think play football every day?
Exactly. And that's exactly where we're going, which is awesome.
And do you not, I mean, the long-term economic value there is really, really, really big. But we need to make sure as an industry that our decision makers are going to be able to grow along with the scope of the space.
For sure.
That's what I am most concerned about, because right now, again, Scoots, I'm sure, can, Nessa too, man. You take a look at how the sausage is made in esports in a lot of respects, and it ain't pretty right now. And there's just a lot of things, and we're not talking about bad guys here, okay? We talked about that at the beginning of the show. What I'm talking about is there are people that I know in esports that I know have the best of intentions, that I know are trying to build things and are trying to do good things for the people in their sphere. But I worry, as the scene grows, is the infrastructure in place? That's why, I am so enthusiastic about what I'm seeing from Complexity and Jason Lake. I think he's by and large doing it the right way. He's got a big organization behind him that is going to help him grow with the scene and grow his individual players as brands and take advantage of what I think these value channels are going to grow into. I am less confident that some of the big organizations in esports are ready to evolve along that path. I think too many of them still see themselves as, well, we're part of the player base and we got our audience over here, and mainstream, we don't really need that.
And to your point about Jason, he literally threw away almost 20 years of a brand in a lot of ways, right?
Like,
Colors, look, and for all the right reasons, right? Making it like the
absolutely
star, like so smart.
But man, I tell you what, knowing him, like I was both excited and devastated when the news of the
and I think
people realize how iconic the red tie is, man. But
now it's just a blue tie. Like I used to get. I mean,
but God bless him.
I didn't like his schoolboy uniform. I never have. Like, I'm like, you know, why are you wearing the Wall Street power tie? I said that to him 20 years ago almost. Like, why are you wearing the Wall Street?
Fair enough.
And I obviously Jason and I go way back. Good times, bad times. We're great now, but ballsy move by him, and his organization. You know, and his own hardcore fan base gave him a little of both sides of it. Like, I understand it. Way to go. And others were like, what the fuck did you just do to me? Like I've got your posters on my wall. What did you do to me? It's like it's like
made it vintage. Favorite, it's worth more now.
Yeah,
right,
it's like
there you go.
Your favorite sports team like goes from St. Louis to somewhere else, right? Right? That's kind of how things
Rip Rams
do to me, right? But yeah,
except they're actually good now. They,
I know, yeah.
Years they were in St. Louis.
But I think your point is also accurate. You've got some people that like, no, this is what got me to the dance, and I'm not changing my dance steps, and that will hurt them eventually. Like you have to adapt, overcome, whatever the Marine saying is, right?
Hell of a lot of truth to that.
But ballsy move by Jason. And again, you have to fast moving, only going to get bigger. And we'll always have this, like the demographic is growing in the gap, the age is growing, but we still have this core that everybody wants, this disposable young male and now female demographic that don't watch TV, don't read magazines, don't read newspapers. Like we've always had that because that's who gamers are. But now it's getting.
That's why I honestly like one of the things that still always surprised me and still does surprise me when I first got into gaming and I first had contact with esports, and it's much more recent for me than it is for you. I've really only been behind the scenes for about 5 years now, but I was always puzzled by this whole. There was this idea that we don't want to go mainstream. We want to keep our identity. We're esports. We don't want that.
That's not a was. That's still prevalent and strong.
We're going to become the mainstream. Like our core audience is the future.
Everybody games.
Yeah, man.
Look, it used to be everybody poops. Now it's everybody's games. My mom is gaming right now at her desk. She's playing like a hide and seek, like find the candlestick game. She games more than me every day, right? People on their phones, old people on their iPads. Like everybody games in some regard these days, right? It's just, again, it's no longer now it's cool to be like, I don't want to use the word nerdy or like, but it's everyone games. So it's like, it's going to be accepted more and more as we go forward. And Ninja is the outlier right now, if you will, let's say. Ninja will be that size, that breadth of person is going to be one of many eventually, right?
Because Ninja is the size of a Hollywood.
Ninja right now might be Michael Jordan. But there's going to be a LeBron.
Absolutely. He's already got people nipping at his heels in different ways, right?
And the thing is, I will say, I do not know him personally. I met him like once years ago for 5 seconds, okay? Which, by the way, when I let that slip to my little 12-year-old cousin, like, oh my God! Anyway, but I really do think we got insanely lucky that the guy who may end up being the Michael Jordan, probably will end up being the Michael Jordan gaming. Like, he's actually a pretty good dude.
Yeah,
Imagine all the other guys. There are a lot of streamers that I know that I've enjoyed their product from time to time, but I'm kind of probably glad that they're not necessarily viewed as the ambassador.
There's an important question to ask there, though, in that he's successful because he's smart. He's not an idiot. And someone who's smart understands the audience of that game and the appropriate way to act. So I'm not saying he's not a nice person, but I am saying that anyone who were to blow up to that level and maintain it longer than a week probably is smart enough to keep their shit together.
No.
It depends on the person. We see athletes blow up all the time. We see movie stars blow up all the time. I think where Ninja... I think, and again, I do know Tyler and I do know Jess because again, from his competitive days.
I suspected you did, which is
and again, like if you go look at his old streams, like he's much like any other.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And he adapted.
He also he was in the right place at the right time, right? So
every successful person was
streaming the game when it dropped on Prime and already as a popular guy. Like to your point, if that would have been somebody else, it could have been a totally different outcome.
Right.
But he took that success, had an agency around him as well that probably keeps him checked, has a wife that keeps him checked, and they made a conscious decision that Tyler should change how he acts.
Yes.
Because of that game. Now, if he blows up playing Counter-Strike, he probably stays a little bit more caustic, stays a little bit more Tyler, right? And there's nothing wrong with adapting and growing up, especially when millions of dollars on the line, right? So I think right place, right time, and then smart enough to recognize, like, this is the chance of a goddamn lifetime. If I fuck this up.
Yeah.
And so
look at the value on the table, right?
He stumbled a few times here and there, right? As anyone would when you get this huge spotlight shined on you. But again, I think he's done an amazing job of taking this ambassadorship and going with it. Now, I think in some regards, if you sat me down with him and the Pop Dog Loaded guys, I would go, you're jumping the shark with him, man. He's doing too much. You're personalizing. But
that's real, man. I tell you,
how do you know that? Like, you don't know how long this might last, right?
Like, so you could write a business case about that. Like, that's actually really hard. But one thing I'll say, we have gotten like a little far afield here, but I do think it is interesting because one of the things that that strikes me a lot about streaming is that there's a lot of that I think is so important to esports. There really is a lot of brand crafting, and you really do have to think about that that way. Like one of my favorite guys to watch on Twitch is Co Carnage, and he's very open on his streams about the fact that he's like, look, I don't swear on my streams, or I try not to. I keep my chat safe for work, and it's not a value judgment. It's because I've looked at my stream, and this is my chat, my community, this is all part of the product that I'm offering. And this is how I want to position that product. It's not that I think that using profanity is wrong or that I think you're wrong for typing this and that in chat. It's just that that's what I have to do as a streamer to add value for my audience. And that's what I think more esports teams holistically need to be thinking like that. They need to be thinking about who are our audience in different titles? How are we going to better reach them and create a product that they and their families can feel comfortable consuming? And then how are we going to transition that product and try and get a few of the people that are buying our hot sauce to try our bottled beverage?
Yep. And Co, like, even before he blew up, when he was just a streamer trying to figure it out, like, that leads to who he is too. Like, he's not being disingenuous to not swear and to have, like, he's 100%. A community around who he kind of really is, right? He's not a drunken asshole sailor when he's off stream. He's not the opposite, right? And Tyler's not either, right? Tyler looked at his toxicity as a hardcore gamer who gets pissed and said, I need to swear less. I did not act this way because my audience has changed. He adapted for a different reason, I think, than Co did. Co is just like, this is how I'm going to be because this is how I am comfortable being. I hope you all come along with my ride. And that builds a community that supports those things, right?
Yeah. But the other example, though, the other reason that I bring him up is that now, if you tune into his stream, it's almost like that community has gone through, he's just had his second kid. Oh,
they're all, yeah.
You've sort of seen that evolve and seen that grow up, and that to me is part of the reason why I'm so convinced that esports isn't going to lose its identity more. It's going to become the identity for a huge chunk of mainstream media product. Like, you are seeing right now esports come of age, and it is like there are far more success stories than not about the ability to make that transition and appeal to a different kind of audience and appeal to, they used to be our audience when they were 15 and now they're 25, 30, they're finding careers, but we can still appeal to these people. We can still put out a product that has huge economic value and is a meaningful part of their lives. And that, I brought that up because I was watching his stream today and just reflecting on that, how I think that's a metaphor for a lot of the success, a lot of the reason that I think esports in general is going to have success.
Right, well, that was a very sunny closing comment from Nahaz. That was very positive, encouraging. So I'm going to take that as a great point to come to what's always my favorite part in the show, because I get to watch everyone's wheels turn as they struggle to come up with an answer. So we always end a cooldown on, what stories are you paying attention to? Or the last one was my personal favorite of, what question would you ask Gabe if he had to give you an honest answer? So today I want to ask, going back to our main topic of the show, and say if you were to see a regulation or a structure added to esports, either a specific esports or in general, what would you want to see focused on, or what would you like to see added? So some of the things we talked about, developers taking stronger control of their license and vetting tournaments either before or afterwards, players, taking ownership of their image rather than teams seizing 100%. Those are some examples. So the answer that I'm going to go with while you guys sit there and talk for a little bit is I've been following what Scoots has been doing. I've been looking at CSGO for a while, not as a player, but looking at what team owners have tried to do with their leagues and some of the player exploitations, and really admired CSGO players, Scoots, the Players Association, everything for putting their foot down and protecting player rights. And that is something I do not see in Dota. I continually see players exploited again and again. And it's heartbreaking that we're not at a working together stage yet. So the regulation that I would like to see developed is something similar in Dota. Some kind of camaraderie or representation for Dota players that really brings like DPC concerns or other things to the table with a united voice rather than one tweet being the policy leader.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I'm gonna join you in that, but I'm gonna say that in Dota in particular, because of the way that the power structure works, I actually don't think that that's enough. I don't think that in CSGO, because so much of the financial power structure actually flows between players and the organizations, I think that there's much more of a scope for a players association to be able to band players together and negotiate in an adversarial relationship against the orgs. In Dota, the orgs actually don't have that much power. And so a players association by itself, I don't know is going to have the same bite. I think what's going to have to happen in Dota is it's actually going to have to be Valve that says, look, Scoots mentioned earlier the idea of a tournament license. There actually really is not such a thing in Dota. And I do think there needs to be a formal tournament license. There needs to be, if you want to have a Dota tournament with a prize pool above X dollars, here's a contract that you need to sign, a binding legal document that you need to agree to. And one of the things is that every player participating in this event is going to have a contract with the tournament organizer that is going to be legally binding under the laws of wherever the tournament is held and in the US where Valve does its business. And that gives us a much more solid framework, exactly for the reasons that Scoots and I were talking about earlier in the show. And I don't think it's actually, the funny thing is, people with familiarity with law are going to say, well, that's Valve assuming a bunch of liability. Why would they do that? I actually don't know that they're assuming any liability that they don't already have. Yeah. But again, we could easily do a show on it.
Yeah, and for me, it's always the same answer. Like, it's player activist stuff, right? Like as these things all get bigger and better, like the money's all coming in. Team owners are getting VC in the millions and valuations in the hundreds of millions. Obviously, the IP, unlike sports, is owned by a Valve, a Blizzard. So you've got two sides of that are very strong in this power struggle, and then you've got the talent, which obviously I don't mean on-air talent. I mean the talent in the room, the players, right? And again, thankfully, the Counter-Strike players have gotten together, and it has actually opened up a lot of other players to start thinking about it. I do get messaged fairly regularly from other communities going, hey, we see what you're doing over there. Can we have a meeting? And how'd you do that? Is it easy to do? Is it hard to do? Should we do it? So the discussions are starting at least, right? And I even have a pinned tweet like, you guys are enemies in the server. Outside the server, you need to act as allies, even if that means you're just in a Discord group and you're going, hey, let's tell ESL that. Let's tell these guys this. Let's all agree. Like, it doesn't have to be a formalized, legalized thing like the Players Association is. Maybe it never would be for you. But again, TOs want good, solid feedback because they want happy players, right? And so, I certainly look at the closed leagues that already exist, and obviously Call of Duty is coming as well. And those are NFL, NBA models, right? So I certainly look at them and go, oh, man, Overwatch, you all should have a PA, right? I know Riot has one on the LCS side, right? Because that dynamic is already built. Like we have to navigate this world in Counter-Strike of global teams everywhere, leagues everywhere, Valve not really caring. That I can't lean on those antitrust laws in the United States, right? I can't. But players in Overwatch can, right?
Oh, yes, they can. And that's the thing. If somebody were to sue in that regard tomorrow, my suspicion is that I think that would end up again. The big uncertainty is how far does intellectual property go? Does that trump everything?
Hasn't been challenged yet.
Like that's exactly
like TL brought up a really good point 2 years ago, I think, when it first blew up, or a year and a half ago, when it first blew up with you guys in Dota, that Valve had to come out and say, no, anybody and their mother can take this part of the game and show it. ESL doesn't own this.
Which to me, which was a huge problem. But
it's a huge piss on the TO's revenue stream and all that. But they kind of laid the groundwork for what their IP could and couldn't be used for. TL's point was, wait a minute, the minute they're on ESL stage, the minute they paid for all that to happen, is it not transformative enough? Like, this will be the next set of lawsuits, right?
Oh, absolutely. I suspect that the groundwork is already being laid.
Years ago and lost over this exact same thing. So I'm a big fan of at least players getting together and figuring out what they're pissed about and trying to collectively resolve that.
Just the exchange of information.
Yeah,
your mind would be blown by how many. I'm sure Scoots will be on board with this. Behind the scenes, you see so many fuck ups that could have just been avoided if somebody had shared information.
We didn't know you all felt that way. Now you do, right? and again, like, if you're Overwatch, you probably want a PA, because PAs are not necessarily meant to fuck everybody but the player. Like, it sets up, like, you've got these people that are already a huge negotiating force, right? Team owners and Blizzard are negotiating all sorts of shit. These guys just want to be at the same table. They'll lose stuff with the Player Association. That could lead to a draft. That can lead to all sorts of things that aren't necessarily in perfectly the best overall interest of a player. Minimum salaries, maximum salaries, all those kind of things. But you grow up the sport. You turn this thing into a proper business on all sides.
I think that's a big, because that, to me, I mean, I think enough people have heard these whisperings that I could be comfortable talking about it, but there have been attempts in the past to establish a Players Association in Dota, and they've almost immediately broken down. And part of the reason is, well, first of all, personality clashes, but also because
your world is so broken by your international, though, man. As much as we all love it, it breaks the
the
economy.
Again, you spent most of the past couple episodes of the Cooldown talking about that. But,
has it? Yeah.
But the thing is, right? It's news to a lot of these players that the creation of a Players Association is not going to immediately and irrevocably improve everything that they want, right? That the negotiating process involves sacrificing some things to get something else, and that's part of the, it's been news to everybody in Dota that, wait a minute, the things that I value and am willing to sacrifice may not be the thing that this other. Oh, wait, whoa. So it's not an easy process, but it is absolutely, I think Scoots and I agree, a part of the necessary growing pains.
Yeah, and what I always say is, like, what this does is it puts you guys, I'm talking to players, this puts you guys at the table. Yeah. That's all it starts with. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want off that table, but it puts you there with a strength to go and have conversations with the IP owner and teams collectively. but it doesn't necessarily magically get you more money. Like, you know, it's more work. Like, you got to go to meetings. You got to figure this shit out. Like, it would be much easier for all these players on the board and everyone else who's helping just to fucking not worry about it sometimes, right? But
let's go play another pub, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
But that's the thing. You have to understand, it's not, you know, the organizations and the developer, it's not that they're bad guys, it's that they're working within a legal system in Western countries that is an adversarial system where their lawyers are charged with advocating for their clients. And so if you don't have a voice at that table with legal representation to advocate for your interests, eventually real bad things are going to happen for you.
Yeah. So ultimately, I'm gonna wrap things here. You can always do another show, guys. It's always an option. With what it sounds like, what we talk about, I think what every single cooldown comes down to is discussing communication. So Scoots, Nahaz, myself, we all want to see communication lines expanded, opened up, and, you know, people working together to mature the industry, because let's face it, we have all committed our lives to this. So we're kind of hoping that people don't fuck it up. It's really, that's really what it comes down to.
It's a very nice denouement.
So as always, thank you for joining us here on the Cooldown. You know, thank you to SirScoots and Nahaz for being our guests for this episode. For those of you who are watching or listening, we really appreciate if you could leave any comments. Let us know what you thought, ideas for future episodes. Head over to these guys' Twitters and start talking to them there about these things. We want you to join the conversation, and please, you know, share, like, subscribe, review, comment. All of those things really help out content, and they help other people find this content, so then you guys can argue with each other. It's a whole cycle that feeds each other. So thank you. We hope you enjoyed the Rivalry Cooldown, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.